Hi, everyone. Welcome to another amazing topic of conversation. Thank you to my sponsors, the Health Channel and the Ready Check Go program, and also the I Remember bracelet against genocide. So today I want to welcome Howard Shore. Howard, welcome. Thank you for
It's
being with us.
it is so nice to be here. It's so nice to be reconnecting, and thank you for having me on the show.
Uh, no, thank you. And the reason I wanted to talk to you is because, and on a personal note, I feel that everything is like now it's reinventing ourselves. So now we're talking about, especially in the event business, it's like pre COVID and post COVID. And that's how we are looking at things. And I wanted to know from your point of view, because you coach a lot of leaders, you you're well in touch during the pandemic with a lot of the big corporations. So I wanted to touch on that and tell us a little bit about if it's a misconception, what's going on in the business world.
So, you know, it's an has definitely been an issue for you, right? Depending on what industry you're in, this dialogue is a whole different dialogue. So when we're talking to an audience, this is the hard part: is if you're in the event business or you had a you've had a tough 24 months. If a lot of your revenue came from the cruise industry, again, you've had a tough 24 months. If you were in technology, if you were in construction, if you were in a whole bunch of other industries, you didn't skip a beat. And maybe some companies actually had an advantage. But here's the thing, those things pass, right? All those do is, and I think it's wonderful when these things happen. That sounds crazy, but it's a good wake-up call. When events like COVID happen, when any kind of difficult event happens to us as business owners, it helps us see our weaknesses. Helps us see where we're vulnerable, where we might get hurt. Things like COVID, those don't happen every single year and they don't happen every month. And so your adjustment to that is going to be very different than the normal course of business. So you talked about reinventing. I think a lot of times people are too focused on how do I reinvent myself. They're so busy reinventing that they never ever get momentum. And so the question every business owner should be asking themselves is, do I have a momentum? And if I don't, what would I need to do so that I can change the momentum of my business? And many times that is not like a reinvention. And too often you leave what was working to go run off at the next thing, and you never finish building the first thing. And usually that you had momentum, and then you destroy momentum by running off at your reinventions. So hopefully your reinventions are enhancements to what should already be a good business model so that it transcends time. And then we're always adjusting our businesses as needs, wants, and desires change because the world's changing. Think about if you're in the car industry and you've been building gas-powered cars for forever. If you're not thinking about electric cars at this moment, eventually you're going to be like the typewriter. Now, will gas cars completely go away? I don't know whether that's going to happen, although it's looking pretty probable. But it's definitely changing, and if you don't go with the changing times, you become irrelevant to the consumers and what they're looking for.
Like you said in one of your vlogs, don't sell chocolate to someone that actually wants a fruit.
Yes. And by the way, we're all, I've had 9 businesses. We are all guilty of doing that. We build what we want, what
Oh,
we're
yeah.
excited about. And really, you've got to be outside of your building thinking about what are people consuming? What do they really want to consume? And then maybe I can sell a piece of fruit to somebody that wants to have chocolate. But if I don't bring them chocolate first, they go to the next building.
Got it. Focus.
Yes.
So
Focus on the customer.
focus, well, not only on the customer, but also focus on your plan.
So your plan, if it is built not around a customer base, you're going to probably be very severely disappointed.
No, 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 I didn't mean a customer base because for us in marketing, PR, and events, it's always the customer.
Correct, correct,
It's how to guide the customer to sell a product or a service. So it's always about the customer. So,
correct, correct.
so talking about the customer, it brings us to the next current topic, which is talent.
Yes.
And how do we acquire, because we're always searching for the perfect talent. And when we see it, we want to grab it. But now there is a lack of even any talent.
So here's what's funny. Everybody's been talking about this during COVID, and they're talking about the Great Resignation. And yes, I think more people quit than they were used to in the past. But I also believe that there was some pent up demand there for people to change jobs. They weren't happy where they were at, and it just became very obvious to them. And then when they weren't treated the way they thought they should during COVID, it was a wake up call. But here's the thing: go back pre-COVID. I can't remember the last time I had a high growth company that told me that, man, it's super easy to find talent. I can't remember the last time, because even going into COVID, we had one of the lowest unemployment rates that we had ever seen, below a level that we ever thought was possible. And it had been running like that for several years. So this is not a new problem. And the other thing that I will say to the folks listening to this is most people really were not very good at hiring talent to begin with. So on average, only about 25% of people's hires historically have actually been a right hire. And then they continue to work through that gyration of trying to replace their bad hiring mistakes. So most companies, if they're honest with themselves, this is not a core competency. So, the thing that we have been pushing pre-COVID, during COVID, which we actually saw COVID as an opportunity in certain industries, and then post-COVID, is this really needs to be a core competency in every company. Being able to find, hunt down, attract, and then hire the right people, and then have systems to actually help them grow with your organization and want to stay there. And it's not, these soft systems are not the things most of us think of as business owners. We think about strategy, we think about executing our plans, we think about cash, and we can't do any of that without people. And then if you go into most companies and you look at what they're best at, it is not selecting people. Now, we've been looking over the last 18 months, and I had a client last year that grew 400%. All right. They actually went from 30 employees to 150 employees in 12 months during COVID, when everybody said they couldn't fire anybody. The difference with them versus a whole lot of other people that couldn't even hire like two people was the amount of energy they actually put in that area. So we realized if they needed to hire a certain number of people every month, the first question was, so who are the full-time recruiters doing this? Well, we're hiring some people outside, and kind of during our free time, we start looking for people. That doesn't work. You need to have you need to have people that are 100% focused on that if you really want to win the war on talent.
But hiring outside to hire inside, does it really make sense? Because the
So
people hiring inside don't know the company culture or exactly the person that really, it's not like a cookie cutter.
So we need different strategies. Like, you know, placing ads online is not necessarily recruiting, it's marketing, right? And we get certain people in. Once you've gotten past that, which everybody's doing, so that's why it gets crowded, there's not enough candidates in that pool, somebody needs to recruit. I I believe in using external recruiters, but I see too much dependence on that. So those people are not 100% committed to filling your job only. They're working with lots of different clients, and then many times the best candidates are going to the highest bidders. So those of you who find the cheapest recruiter you can find, you're usually not necessarily going to win with that model. Now, if they're charging the same to every customer, so everybody's paying, let's say, a 15% fee, well, then with that firm, you'll get the same chance at candidates as other ones. But the reality is those recruiters get to know your company. They know where candidates are going to be happier. They're good ones because they get to know you. They see whether there's a lot of churn in the people they're putting in those companies, and they're going to double down on the ones that make them look good as well. So even when you're using external recruiting firms, they have a selection process of who they want to give the most emphasis on. And it's not always the small business, which is our primary client base is that, um, 30 employees to 500 employees. That's the middle market. And they have a different challenge than those big companies where candidates are dying to work for them because of the brand name and what that'll do to their resumes. So what I'm saying is full-time internal recruiter, yes, they know your coach. Sorry, I almost knocked over my water. They know your internal culture. And what's different about for them is not only do they help you hire candidates, but then they get intimate with those people that come in and they actually get to see what happens afterwards. And they get the enjoyment of connecting with the people that they help. So they're more ingrained. But the other thing is they know they must fill a position or they don't have a job. And the problem with external recruiters is they only fill a fraction of the jobs that they have. The internal person has to fill the jobs. And if they don't fill them on time, we lose revenue. We lose profits because we don't have enough bodies. So that was the thing. So take my client that grew 400%. The first thing we helped them realize is without enough boots on ground, you don't get your revenue. Boots on ground first, train them, then you get your revenue. So the first thing we have to solve is a repeatable recruiting system that constantly has candidates coming through every week so that you can choose only the best ones. And the problem I see in a lot of companies is they only get dribs and drabs of candidates. And because of that, many times none of them are any good and they'll still choose one because they don't have any candidates. And that's because they don't have the competency of attracting candidates. The last piece that I'm going to highlight, if you have crickets when you're putting ads out and you're trying to attract people to your company, this gets to some of what Gladys does is it's reputation management. What is your reputation in the market as an employer? There's a few, even Goliaths here in South Florida that people just know, man, if you go to work there, it's going to be hell. They turn everybody over every 12 to 24 months. They don't treat you well. They burn you out. Those are bigger companies. What they wind up doing is they pay battle pay. But us as the average employers, we can't do that. So we have to create a brand in the market as an employer. And then when you actually build the culture right, usually half of your new employees, if you're smaller, you're not growing at a 400%, at least half of your employees should be coming from referrals from your existing employees. And I'm going to tell you, if your existing employees aren't referring anybody in there, it's telling you something. You either got a process problem for asking them, just like asking for referrals for business, or you've got a culture problem and they're not so sure they want anybody else to go through what they're going through.
Now you're talking, everything that you're talking makes 100% sense. But now you're applying to jobs over an algorithm that literally takes out half of the people because there's a word that's not in the algorithm.
So we train differently. So none of our clients use AI to select candidates.
Okay.
We use different tools, but there will always be a problem with AI in that it's a learned system, and any biases that you build into the system will replicate themselves. So your system has to be able to. So here's what's funny.
It's like making the same mistake over and over.
Correct. So what's ironic is, so the system I use and the companies I own is we don't even look at a resume until we do a certain screening process. The resume is not the first screen. People lie on resumes. The information we really need to know is not there. So we have other screening mechanisms that we use. Then the resume for me is just to check a few boxes. Do they have certain experience that's the minimum to get a phone screen? We only look for certain things. The whole resume itself, I remember a number of years ago, we did a study, and because we saw, and we actually set them up, we sent some great candidates into a pile for our clients, and they would get excluded. One of the reasons they get excluded is there'd be a typo in the resume, or there would be it was not a full, exciting resume like other people. Well, for sales positions, the best salespeople actually don't need to look for jobs. And what happens for them
You
is
can make
when
a
you reach
typo.
out, they just slap a resume together, they get it over to
And
you,
then
where,
they make a typo.
where all the other people have it professionally done, they didn't even write it, it's been framed. They're just like, whatever, I got to give you something. So what we found in sales positions was they were screening out all the good people for the wrong reasons. So not all, but you've got to be
But it
careful.
totally, it makes total sense.
Yeah. So for me, the resume, you can't ignore it, but you just need it as a screen. But be careful what you're screening for. So for certain positions, that precision doesn't matter. But what you will screen for, like say for example, one of our clients needs to hire a director of sales, and he sends me a resume over the weekend. Howard, take a look at this. And the title is about marketing. And the position the guy has positioned himself in the resume is marketing. So I contacted the owner because I just scanned it real quick. Um, didn't we need a sales manager? Yeah. And we also need that person to be able to sell in the beginning because they're ramping up. I said, okay, great. So why are you sending me a marketing resume? Well, because he's from our industry and he's been out there. And I'm like, but it's all marketing. There's nothing in his resume highlighting how great he was at building sales forces, building teams, growing teams, getting them produced, meeting quotas. There's nothing in there, so I'm done. So it's all in what you look for that's really, really important.
Yeah. Okay, my next question, it has to do with equality. And
Okay.
since you have coached a lot of business leaders, have you seen a difference between women and men?
Of course. And, it's the old men are from Mars, women are from Venus type of thing. I will tell you, and you know that I always say this about Sylvia, my wife. She's one of the best leaders I know. She's a judge, but she's the administrative judge for Dade County within her, in workers' comp. And she's done an amazing job over the last 20 years of transforming the whole office that she runs of, I think it's 30 or so people, and the culture that she's built there. And I think the one difference, because I am going to preface this, you can't do anything across the board and say all women are going to
No,
be
no,
better than all
and
men
I get
and
it.
all men
Yeah.
suck and
No,
so forth.
but I read, the
But
reason I'm asking you this is because I recently read an article that said that when a woman was in a leadership position, there was a return of investment of 13 to 18% more.
so there's a couple of things there. I'm sure the data is accurate. The pool, I don't think is large enough. However, I do think as I've looked over time, there's one key difference between male and female, and that is emotional intelligence, I guess is the word I would use. Empathy and emotional intelligence are not exactly the same thing, but they play together. And, I will tell you that the state pays horribly. How anybody will work for the salaries my wife Sylvia can offer, I just can't even comprehend um, how they live and and how they work so hard for her. But the main difference is how she treats them as a person, how she sees them as people, how she really recognizes their situation rather than rolls it under the carpet. And because of that, she connects very well with them and they connect very well with her. And that causes her to get a lot more productivity out of people that most people probably wouldn't even hire. And when I look across the chasm, man or female, the greatest difference between the ones that people do a lot more for, and because they want to, is that ability to connect with them as human beings. And I think in general, women were better raised for that than men. And there's a lot of things about us guys that we stayed out of all that touchy-feely stuff and sharing emotions and hearing people's people problems and all of that. We're like, oh my God, how am I going to do that?
I don't
And
want
it's
to do
since birth, right? That was mom's job, right? Not dad's job. And so now, if you raise it from how we're raised all the way through up business, you're going to see a big difference between men and female. Now, there's drawbacks too, that we've seen over time. Women haven't asked for things as much as they should, and so that also transcends into business as well. So they may not win some business that they should because they don't use some of the techniques the men do. And vice versa. I think you get different benefits. So I think there's pros and cons to both sides. It's when you can marry the learning from both that I think you'll get extraordinary productivity out of people.
No, I think you nailed it perfectly. I call it emotional connection. Connecting emotionally, it's what it's all about. But yes, you describe it exactly, and it makes sense that the productivity rate is higher because of what you just said about your wife. They
Hmm.
work so hard, and now with everybody going back and women don't want it to go back to the workforce is because of that, because they want that emotional connection. They want to feel it's not about the money. A lot of the women, it's about money, but not all of them. It's about connecting emotionally, the benefits that they get, being able to stay home with the kids, and somebody that understands that part.
But it's about choice, right? So I know some men,
Oh, yes.
they're at stay-at-home husbands, and they're very happy doing that. And in their families, the roles have been switched. The reality, though, is what you're describing a little bit has to be with um, their decision process. So what they want out of life is different than some of the other really aggressive folks that they're competing against, and it creates a chasm, right? Um, so so the problem is if I don't want to give up my entire life for work, it's going to cause different outcomes than the ones that have made the decision that work comes first over everything else.
Correct.
And we've been a society, I think, that suffered from that over a long period of time. I can't tell you how many folks are divorced that were business owners, men and female, because the choices it entails. And in general, I think I'm going to go back to the way we're raised. The women were raised differently to think differently. It didn't mean that they weren't ambitious, that they didn't want to do very important things in the world. What they were willing to sacrifice to do it, from what they were raised and saw, I think is what's influenced this. But I will say we've got a new generation now where um, our kids were raised differently. So there's more balance, I think, in that we're going to continue to see in households where this will balance it out and will free. And then, maybe what we'll see in households is two spouses discussing which one has the highest potential. And I think more and more you'll start seeing that they may put the women first, which why we started seeing for the last 10 or so years more men being the stay-at-home dad instead of the breadwinner. And I'm sure what went into that decision process was, you know what? The wife has the better prospects. And the wife really wants to do this, and the man really doesn't. So it can work out either way. But to get back to your point, I think a lot of it has to do with getting more results has to do with the emotional intelligence.
But now, also you touched on a good point about this generation. I think it's a more balanced. I think it's not about what we grew up with. Women stay home, they take care of kids, men go out, they work, they're the breadwinners. Now it completely changed. Now it's a more equal share of responsibilities.
Yes.
So before, we don't have a lot of time, but before we leave, I wanted to continue the conversation we were having offline about the book that all of your clients are reading, Leadership and Self-Deception.
Yeah, so it was written by the Arbinger Institute, and the audience really doesn't know me, but a big thing that I've done over the last 20 years is I've had 9 different coaches for myself. One of my first coaches that I hired for me handed me that book and said, "You got to read this," and it really opened up my eyes. The essence of the book is. The analogy of being in the box really has to do with the title. Is when we're interacting with different human beings at different points in the day, we have a tendency at times, more often than we realize, to stop seeing people as human beings and seeing them as objects that we have to make us right and them wrong. And we start creating these self-deception moments that causes us to treat, talk, and act towards people in ways that actually drag them into a box and actually makes the relationships unproductive. And I see this all the time in businesses. And actually recently, one of the clients who read the book was their COO was in danger. That person was this close to getting fired, probably has no idea. And we started talking about the concepts in the book. And what happened was is this person actually carried um, the CEO carried certain self-image things about themselves, and the COO was carrying certain self-image things about themselves. And what happens when there's a deference from what you believe to be true, you tend to it's like having an enemy now enter the box, and you start acting to try to support your, we'll call it self-limiting beliefs.
So
And
we
so in this
become
particular,
our own enemy.
huh?
What you're saying is we become our own enemy.
Correct. And so what was really interesting was with this particular person, he was getting all caught up on certain comments the person would make, which actually started poking at some of the CEO's belief systems about themselves. So that bugged them and they dragged them into the box. Long story short, once the CEO realized that he was in the box, he had to change his perspective. And what the perspective needed to be was that, and by the way, you can't behave your way out of it, you can't skill your way out of a box, all of that. What you have to do is you have to realize that you're in it to begin with, and then you have to shift your mindset towards the other person to really understand, first of all, where they're coming from and that this is not a battle between you and them. When he got uh, through this thought process, he realized that rather than coaching some issues that were coachable with the COO, he was repelling him and condemning him, so to speak. Once he realized that, his dialogue with the COO was very different. Hey, listen, we're not on the same page on certain things, but not for the reasons that we think. And once he started trying to truly and genuinely try to help the CEO see how he could be more successful, the dialogue then shifted because now they were both able to get out of the box and come to a path that would be successful for the company, for the relationship, and for that person in the role. But by being in the box, he wasn't able to, neither one of them were able to help the other person. So what I love about this book, and something that people should think about, because I don't know that I've done the best job of describing it, is it helps you see all the different transactions you're having to all day with different people, and how your self-deception may be causing you not to allow the relationship to work properly.
Well, Howard, before we go, I know that you have two really amazing books. Where can they get them? What's the name of your book so that everybody knows you, that everybody can get to read what you've written because it's really interesting.
Well, thank you so much. So both books are available on Amazon as well as I think all the other online bookstores. Typically, people want to read one versus the other depending on their situation. So the first book, Your Business is a Leaky Bucket, was written because one of the things I realized from being involved in everything from startup to $20 billion in revenue, that all companies had the same 15 leaks. And whether you liked it or not, the bigger your business, the bigger the leaks were. And you can never make those leaks go away. All you can do is try to contain them. And so there are a lot of things that you accept in your business that you shouldn't. And so that book helps you realize the cost of those 15 leaks and what you can do about it. The other book was for companies that were scaling and they wanted a system that could scale their businesses better. So growing up in my businesses, I was reading a lot of books to try to figure out. I knew there was a better way and I couldn't figure it out. And one of my frustrations was there was no one book to go to. I'd read one book and I loved it. And then we'd go back with the team and we mess with the team. Then I read the next book and we'd go back and we'd start changing stuff. The problem is they didn't interconnect and it got very clunky and confusing for the team. So what I've done in that book is we've taken the best practices from over 100 business books and put it into one repeatable system that you can slowly digest and build into your company based on where your challenges were. And so it's got the 5 different steps to growing your business and what you can do about it.
Thank you so
Oh,
much.
and the name of that book is The Leader Launchpad.
Howard, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much. Everyone, stay safe and until next week. Have a great day.
Thank you for having me.